A millionaire CEO is moments away from signing a $50 million deal until his translator disappears. In a room full of Ivy League executives, the only person who understands the ancient legal clause is the cleaning lady. But just when they think she's a one-time miracle, she exposes corporate betrayal, saves the company, and walks away with more than just a job. Who is this woman? And why did she turn down everything until fate forced her hand? Watch until the end to feel every twist, every betrayal, and one powerful rise no one saw coming. Drop a comment if you've ever been underestimated. Don't forget to subscribe for more true underdog stories that hit right in the heart. And hey, share this with someone who deserves to be seen. Brandon Steele stared at the black and white fact sheet in his hand like it had just declared war. His jaw clenched, his fingers tightened. He slammed it on the glass table in the boardroom of Steele and Grant Global, 35 floors above Manhattan, where the view was worth millions. But the moment was costing more. "Why the hell is this even in here?" he barked. "This isn't modern Korean. This is legalese from the 80s. Silence. All 10 executives around the table froze. No one knew what to say. The only sound was the hum of the AC and the faint scratching of a pen being nervously clicked by someone who probably shouldn't be clicking it right now. Brandon turned to his chief of international contracts. "Call Min-ho, now." The man swallowed hard. "He's out. Emergency appendectomy. He left the hospital this morning." Brandon's face paled. "You're telling me the only person in this building who can interpret this contract just had surgery?" The assistant VP chimed in, almost whispering. "We tried reaching a few freelancers, but no one's available within the hour. It's a Saturday." Brandon paced like a lion circling its cage. His company was 5 minutes away from either signing a $50 million contract with one of the top Korean tech firms, or tanking the entire Seoul expansion due to a single translation error. The Koreans were already in the waiting lounge, sipping tea and smiling like they'd won something. And maybe they had. "If we mess this up," Brandon said, voice lower now, but sharper, "we lose the Seoul office. We lose Asia." No one moved. No one breathed. He checked his Rolex. 12 minutes until the official signing. Just outside the boardroom, down the hallway, Rachel Cooper, 27, was wiping down the window panes like she did every day. No one noticed her. They never did. She wore a plain navy uniform, tied her hair in a bun, and kept her eyes on her work. But she wasn't just cleaning, she was listening. She heard the word betrayal through the glass. Law. Then 위약금, penalty. Then habiseo, settlement. Her body froze. Those words weren't common. They were contractual Korean, the kind she used to study before everything in her life fell apart. Her heart skipped. Slowly, carefully, she leaned closer to the door. Inside, the shouting continued. Vanessa Hart, the glamorous communications director, raised her voice. "We'll just push the signing to next week." Brandon turned, thunder in his voice. "They flew 14 hours to be here today. There is no next week." Rachel stepped forward. Her palms were sweaty, her knees almost buckled, but she knocked. 3 firm, steady knocks on the glass. Every head in the room turned. Vanessa groaned. "Are you kidding me? Now is really not the time to refill the water dispensers." Rachel opened the door a crack. Her voice was soft, controlled. "I can help. I understand Korean. I studied it. I lived there for 2 years." Brandon's brows furrowed. "Who are you?" "Rachel Cooper. I clean the executive floors." A beat, then chuckles. A few scoffs. Vanessa laughed outright. "This is a boardroom, not a language class, sweetheart." But Rachel didn't flinch. Her eyes were locked on the facts still sitting on the table. "Give me 2 minutes," she said quietly, "and I'll tell you if they're screwing us." Brandon looked at her like she was either insane or the answer to a problem no one else could solve. He picked up the fax, walked over, and handed it to her without a word. She held it with steady hands. Eyes scanned line after line. The room held its breath. The room was dead silent. 10 suits, 1 furious CEO, and a janitor holding a Korean legal document like it was a loaded weapon. Rachel Cooper stood tall. the fluorescent lights above her catching on the faint smudge of cleaner on her navy sleeve. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't crack. Vanessa Hart rolled her eyes, tossing her manicured hand in the air like swatting a fly. "Oh, come on," she scoffed, her voice dripping with contempt. "Brandon, this is ridiculous. We're not here to audition volunteers from the janitorial staff. This is a $50 million deal, not a school play." A few smirks broke out around the table. Rachel didn't flinch. Brandon didn't smile either. His jaw locked for a second. Then, without a word, he picked up the fax again, walked over, and slapped it into Rachel's hands. "Translate section 3, he said flatly. "Right now." A long pause. Vanessa leaned back in her chair with a sigh, already mentally composing her next "I told you so" email. Rachel's eyes scanned the page fast. Her lips moved slightly as she read in silence. Then she looked up. Her voice was calm, measured. "This clause outlines a 6-month probationary period. If the projected revenue benchmarks aren't met within that time frame, the buyer reserves the right to terminate the agreement. Without penalty." Silence. Brandon blinked. "Without penalty?" Rachel nodded once. "It's a conditional cancellation clause. It's buried under archaic legal phrasing that hasn't been used since the late 90s, but it's there." The CFO leaned forward, grabbing the document from Rachel's hands. "That wasn't in the draft we reviewed last week." Rachel pointed to a line halfway down the page. "They used old-format legal Korean. Not many people spot it unless they've studied under Korean civil law. Most automated tools wouldn't catch it either." Brandon took a slow step back, eyes locked on the paper like it had just transformed into a live grenade. "That clause means, if we sign this and the numbers slip even slightly, they could walk away and keep their tech rights," he muttered. Rachel didn't answer. She didn't need to. The entire room suddenly realized what was about to happen. This wasn't just a miscommunication. It was a trap, a legal landmine wrapped in fancy titles and polite smiles. And a cleaning lady had just disarmed it in 90 seconds flat. The same lady Vanessa had just dismissed as a waste of time. Vanessa's face turned pale. Rachel took a breath, then looked at Brandon directly. "They're testing if you'll miss it," she said, "and if you do, they'll own your software by Q3. That sentence hit like a brick. Brandon turned to his team. "Anyone else catch that before she walked in?" Dead silence. No one answered. No one even blinked. The CEO's voice dropped into a low, razor-edged tone. So out of everyone in this room, the only person who caught the trap was her. Vanessa opened her mouth, but Rachel cut her off. "They used Hapui Seo Shwisog, a clause structure phased out in 2003. It's not taught anymore unless you studied traditional Korean legal writing or lived there long enough to know the tricks." Brandon just stared at her. For the first time, there was something else in his eyes. Not skepticism, not pity, respect. He turned back to the team. "Get the Korean reps back in the waiting room. Cancel the signing. We're redrafting the contract." Then he looked at Rachel again. "Stay." Vanessa opened her mouth again, but Brandon shut her down with one look. Rachel held her breath. The air in the room shifted. For the first time in her life, someone listened. Not to what she looked like, not to her job title, but to what she actually said. Brandon didn't waste a second. He pulled out a chair next to his and motioned. "Sit." Rachel hesitated for just a breath, then slid into the sleek leather seat at the long boardroom table, where hours earlier she was cleaning under it. Brandon opened his laptop, started the Zoom link, and turned the screen toward her. "You speak, you lead." Rachel nodded once, took a deep breath, and unmuted the mic. "안녕하세요. Rachel Cooper입니다. 나는 급적으로 감사해합니다. 당신 우위 인내와 의지에 대한 감사를 표함응합니다." The Korean side blinked. Their eyes flicked between each other, confused at first. Then one executive smiled. He responded warmly in Korean. The tone of the entire call shifted. The tension that had hovered like a storm cloud started to lift. Rachel didn't just translate. She adjusted tone, softened sharp language, and reworded cold legal phrasing into culturally respectful dialogue. She listened, adapted, and spoke as though she belonged there, because in that moment, she did. Vanessa sat stiffly, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like she was watching a chess match she hadn't prepared for, and was now losing. The Korean legal rep nodded slowly, then looked straight into the camera and said, in Korean, "We are open to postponing the signing. Transparency builds trust." Rachel translated in real time, her voice clear, her delivery precise. Brandon blinked. Did they just offer to pause the deal? Rachel nodded. They want to revisit the contract with legal teams on both sides present. They're, surprisingly, grateful someone caught the hidden clause. Brandon leaned back, his jaw unclenching for the first time that morning. The room, once thick with panic, now pulsed with a quiet shock. The Korean partners signed off with a respectful bow. Rachel bowed in return. As the screen went dark, silence returned to the boardroom. But it wasn't the same silence. It was the kind that comes after an earthquake. No one spoke. The executives looked at Rachel like she had just walked through fire and come out without a scratch. Rachel stood slowly, as if unsure if the moment was real. Brandon broke the silence. That meeting just saved this company months of legal chaos. No one argued. Vanessa finally muttered, "Well, she was lucky." Rachel turned to her, calm and collected. "Luck doesn't read legal Korean." Brandon chuckled under his breath. Then he turned to Rachel and asked, "Do you have a degree in languages, translation?" Rachel shook her head gently. "No, sir. Just 2 years living in Busan, and a lot of YouTube tutorials and Korean legal textbooks." Brandon raised an eyebrow. Rachel added, her voice steady now, "Every night, after my shift, I'd study while my little sister was sleeping. I couldn't afford school, but I could afford free Wi-Fi and determination." No one laughed this time. No one dared. Even the CFO looked impressed. Even the marketing VP finally put down his phone. The hierarchy had cracked. And for once, truth had risen from the floorboards. Rachel stepped back, ready to leave the room, her job apparently done. But Brandon wasn't done. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "At least not until I figure out how the hell to repay someone who just prevented a corporate disaster." Rachel looked up, surprised. Brandon paused. Then he smiled. Just a flicker. Not as a CEO, not as a man in power, but as someone who saw something rare. "Rachel Cooper," he said, "you just went from janitor to the most valuable voice in this room." The elevator dinged, but Rachel hadn't moved an inch. She was still standing at the edge of the boardroom, surrounded by stunned executives and a CEO who looked like he had just found a diamond buried in the janitor's closet. Brandon took a step forward. "I want you on my team," he said, voice calm but firm. "Temporary language advisor. Full access. Executive floor only. Starting salary, 5 times what you're making now." The room gasped quietly. Even Vanessa's jaw dropped. Rachel blinked, once. She didn't smile, didn't cheer. Instead, she looked down, thoughtfully, not shyly. "I appreciate it," she said, steady as ever, "but I can't accept." The silence was heavier than before. Brandon frowned. "Why not?" Rachel breathed deeply, choosing her words carefully. "Because I know what this looks like," she said. "The media would eat it up, from mop to boardroom." The janitor who saved the company. Cinderella in a navy jumpsuit. Her voice didn't shake, but there was something deeper in it, something tired, experienced. "But I'm not looking to be someone's headline. I'm not chasing applause." She looked Brandon straight in the eye now. "I need stability. My little sister's in school. I work night shifts so I can take her to class during the day. I can't afford to gamble our lives on a job that might disappear once the buzz wears off." Brandon was stunned, not because she said no, but because she said it with dignity, with clarity. Rachel didn't grovel, she didn't dramatize. She stood her ground, strong, honest, real. Brandon reached into his pocket, pulled out a card, his business card. Heavy stock, embossed gold lettering. A card people rarely received directly from him. He pressed it into her palm. "You have 24 hours, he said. "If you change your mind, the job's yours." Rachel looked at it, then looked at him, didn't speak, just nodded, and walked out of the room. In the quiet of the elevator, her shoulders finally dropped. Her chest rose and fell faster now. The adrenaline was fading. Reality was catching up. She got off on the 7th floor, made her way to the locker room, changed into her street clothes, back into the world where people didn't bow at your language skills, but measured you by your paycheck and your shoes. She took the bus home. The apartment smelled like instant noodles and lavender detergent. Her sister's sneakers were by the door, homework scattered on the table. Rachel dropped her bag, checked the mail, and opened her old laptop. One unread email. Subject, urgent. Surgical consultation update. She clicked. Her eyes scanned the screen. Patient, Ava Cooper. Diagnosis, rapid progression scoliosis. Recommendation, immediate corrective surgery. Estimated cost, $27,400. Timeline, within 14 days to avoid permanent damage. Rachel stared at the screen, frozen. The world spun for a second. Then, she stood up, walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer, pulled out the business card Brandon had handed her just hours ago. She stared at the gold letters, Brandon Steele CEO, Steele and Grant Global. Her hand trembled now, not from fear, from the weight of decision. Rachel didn't sleep that night. At 6:12 a.m., she emailed Brandon. Subject, I'll take the job. 1 week, trial only. By 8 a.m., she was back on the 47th floor. But this time, not with a mop. She wore a blazer, borrowed from her neighbor, and a ponytail that said, "I'm not here to clean windows anymore." Brandon didn't greet her with a pep talk or a handshake. He just nodded, pointed to the empty desk outside his office, and said, "Let's see what you've got." Rachel got to work. Emails, meetings, translation memos, legal clause breakdowns. She absorbed everything. But 3 days in, something felt wrong. She'd been asked to CC Vanessa Hart, the communications director, on all draft translations, even those not yet finalized. Odd. Why would someone in PR need access to legal-only language memos, especially on confidential Korea negotiations? Rachel started paying closer attention. And then she saw it, a forwarded email. Disguised in an internal thread, Vanessa had attached Rachel's unedited Korean notes, then blind copied an external Gmail. Rachel opened the email metadata. The IP address didn't belong to the company. It belonged to Orion Global, a direct competitor who had just launched a suspiciously similar tech platform in Seoul. Heart pounding, Rachel opened Vanessa's inbox again. There it was. A draft offer letter from Orion Global, Vice President of International Strategy, 6-figure salary, signing bonus. Vanessa was selling them out. Rachel sat frozen for a second. Then she moved. Fast. She created a decoy file, a polished, perfectly fake set of internal negotiation notes with slightly altered numbers and deadlines. The kind of file that would trigger a premature counteroffer if leaked. She named it KOR/final draft private.docx and placed it in the shared folder, just where Vanessa could find it. Then she waited. 3 hours later, Rachel's burner email lit up. Orion Global had just released a press statement boasting of their exclusive early-stage partnership with a Korean firm using Rachel's altered figures. Word for word, the trap had sprung. Rachel printed the full email chain, the IP trace, and Orion's public release. She marched down the hallway toward Brandon's office. She didn't knock. She opened the door, stepped in, and said, "I have evidence of internal betrayal." Brandon looked up from his laptop. His face didn't flinch, but his hands stopped typing. She placed the papers in front of him. He read in silence for a solid minute, then a second, then a third. The room felt like a ticking time bomb. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, controlled, lethal. "Vanessa sold us out?" Rachel nodded. "She's been feeding internal documents to Orion in exchange for a VP position." Brandon leaned back slowly. "Are you sure?" Rachel opened her phone, hit play. An audio file began, Vanessa's voice, clear as day. "Once I get the confirmation letter from Orion, I'm out of here. Steele doesn't even realize he's walking into a setup." Brandon's jaw clenched, but he didn't yell. He simply stood up, grabbed his suit jacket, and said, "Come with me." The conference room was full. Over 200 employees stood shoulder to shoulder. Executives lined the walls, assistants whispered, phones silenced. Every eye turned toward the head of the room. Brandon Steele stepped up to the mic. His face was sharp, focused, but not angry, just deliberate. Behind him, a massive screen showed a headline from Orion Global's press release. Right next to it, a screenshot of the falsified document Rachel had planted. He turned to the room. 3 days ago, our internal strategy documents were leaked to a competitor. Gasps, whispers, heads turning. It could have cost us millions, Brandon continued, but one person caught it, tracked it, proved it. He paused, then looked directly at Vanessa Hart. Vanessa Hart has been terminated for breach of trust and corporate espionage. Security is waiting. Vanessa stood frozen. For 1 second, she looked like she might argue. But the moment she saw the legal team enter through the side door, she knew it was over. She grabbed her purse with shaking hands, stormed out as the room parted in silence. Brandon didn't even flinch. He turned back to the crowd. Now, let's talk about the person who saved us. He motioned to the side of the room. Rachel. She stepped forward, hesitant at first. Wearing the same shoes she'd worn on her janitor shift. Same simple jacket. But something in her posture had changed. She walked tall, shoulders back, not like a guest, like she belonged there. In 3 days, Brandon said, Rachel Cooper prevented a $50 million contract disaster, uncovered a corporate traitor, and single-handedly protected our Korea division. He looked around the room. I've worked with Harvard MBAs, Silicon Valley elites, former federal attorneys. I've never seen someone move like this woman moved when the company was on the line. The room erupted. Applause, whistles. Even the old-school VP of Finance, who never clapped for anyone, gave a firm nod. Rachel stood quietly, blinking fast. Not because she didn't expect it, but because deep down, part of her never believed the moment would come. Brandon reached into his pocket, pulled out a small envelope. Effective immediately, he announced. Rachel Cooper is promoted to Director of Global Cultural Strategy. Shockwaves again. Rachel gasped, literally gasped. Brandon smiled. We made up the title this morning, because there's no job description for what you've done. But we're going to build one around you. Rachel took the envelope with trembling fingers. She turned toward the room, heart pounding so loud she could barely hear the claps. But what she did hear, clear as a bell, was her sister's voice in her mind. Someday, you're going to sit in one of those big chairs, and they're going to listen to you. She was there now, in front of all of them, and they were listening. As the crowd thinned and employees returned to work, Brandon stepped down from the platform. He walked slowly over to Rachel, who was still holding the envelope like it was made of glass. For a moment, the buzz of the room disappeared. Just the two of them. Brandon didn't smile this time. He just looked at her. Not as a CEO, not as her boss, but as a man who had just seen something rare and wasn't ready to let it go. You didn't just change the game, he said quietly. You rewrote the whole playbook. Rachel looked up at him. I didn't plan any of this. No, Brandon said, but you earned every second of it. Their eyes locked. Something unspoken passed between them, something neither one of them was quite ready to say out loud. Not yet, but it was there, real, undeniable. The morning after the company announcement, Rachel arrived early to her new office, still getting used to the nameplate on the door. Director of Global Cultural Strategy. She smiled to herself for a moment, then turned serious again. She wasn't here to get comfortable. Not yet. At noon, Brandon stopped by. No assistant, no pretense. Just a quiet knock on the glass and a casual, "You got a minute?" Rachel nodded. He stepped inside and handed her a sleek, black envelope. Corporate Gala. This Friday. It's not mandatory, but I'd like you there. She opened it. Black tie, VIP table, her name in gold foil. But her expression didn't soften. I appreciate it, she said, but I'll pass. Brandon blinked. Pass? I don't want to be a headline on Monday. Janitor turned executive dances with CEO under crystal chandelier. You know how it goes. He studied her. So you're worried about gossip. I'm worried about being used to make a point, she replied, firm but calm, or being mistaken as a corporate fairy tale, not a professional. A pause. Brandon stepped forward, closing the space between them just enough for the air to change. "Rachel," he said carefully, "are you afraid of being a headline? Or afraid that I might actually be serious?" Rachel's breath hitched. No one had ever asked her that before. Not her way of thinking. She glanced down at the invite in her hands. "Maybe both," she said honestly. "I've worked too hard to be seen as anyone's project." "You're not," he said quietly. "Then what am I?" Brandon didn't answer right away. He took his time, like he didn't want to mess it up by speaking too fast. "Maybe I'm still figuring that out," he admitted. "But I know one thing. I'm not just impressed. I'm grateful. Because you walked into that boardroom and changed everything." Rachel's eyes flicked up to meet his, not wide-eyed, not shy, just searching for truth. "If all of this is gratitude," she said softly, "then let's not confuse it with something else." "And if it's not just gratitude," he asked, "then show me." "How?" She smiled faintly, sad and strong at the same time. "When you look at me," she said, "don't look at me like someone you owe or admire. Look at me like someone you respect and mean it." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full. Like neither of them wanted to say too much or not enough. Finally, Rachel handed the envelope back. "I'll decide by Friday." Brandon took it, didn't press, didn't chase. He just nodded and said, "I'll see you around." As he left, Rachel turned to the window. New title, new salary, new respect. But some things still weren't easy. Feelings, boundaries, the fear of being misread, or worse, underestimated. And yet, for the first time, she wasn't running. She was standing still, letting things come, letting him come, if he meant it. 6 months passed. Rachel stood on a glowing stage beneath the skyline of Seoul, South Korea. The conference room at the Intercontinental was packed. Officials, diplomats, global investors. Cameras flashed. She didn't flinch. She wore a navy pantsuit with the company's crest. Calm, commanding. Behind her, the screen read, "Cultural Intelligence in Global Tech, Bridging Borders Through Language." And Rachel Cooper was leading the charge. When the South Korean Prime Minister arrived, the entire room stood. Rachel stepped forward, no notes, no teleprompter, and welcomed him with fluent, nuanced Korean that made even native speakers pause. She didn't just translate. She connected. She didn't just bridge cultures. She led. And when the Prime Minister nodded, smiling with genuine respect, even the toughest critics in the back row applauded. The meeting ended in standing ovation. As the room cleared, Rachel took a breath, stepped down from the podium, and found Brandon waiting by the side wall. Quiet, no entourage, just him in a gray tailored suit, hands in his pockets, smile soft. "You killed it up there," he said. "Takes one to know one," Rachel smirked. He held out a small velvet box. Not a ring box. Smaller, thinner. Rachel blinked, caught off guard. "Brandon?" "Don't worry," he said, chuckling. "I'm not proposing." He flipped the box open. Inside, a folded document printed on elegant paper. Her name typed cleanly at the top. "It's a contract," he said, "and only one clause." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Clause 1, Brandon read. "We choose each other, every day, not because we need to, but because we want to, with our minds, our trust, and our hearts." Rachel went silent, not out of hesitation, but because he said it right. No grand speeches, no fairy tale illusions, just truth, genuine, grounded. She slowly took the contract, reading it again with a half smile playing on her lips. "So," she said, "if I sign this, then we move forward, together, no glass slippers, no rescuing, just two people who know what the other is made of." Rachel nodded, eyes glinting. "Then, this time, I'll sign." Brandon handed her a pen. Rachel didn't hesitate. She signed her name at the bottom in bold ink. No shaking hands, no second guesses. Then she looked up at him. "But I have conditions," she said playfully. "Of course you do. No pity, no pedestal, just partnership." "Done," he smiled. They stood there for a second. Two professionals, in a world of cameras, applause, and global stakes, sharing something quiet, unspoken, but real. No one saw them kiss. Because they didn't. They didn't need to. They just walked side by side out of the building and into the soul night. No drama, no spotlight. Just Rachel and Brandon, finally on equal ground. In a world that often values titles over talent, Rachel's journey reminds us that real worth isn't always found on a resume. She wasn't hired through connections or degrees, but through courage, grit, and years of quiet preparation no one saw. She turned rejection into resilience and doubt into undeniable strength. This story isn't just about corporate twists or last-minute translations. It's about believing in yourself, even when no one else does. It's about the power of standing up, speaking up, and showing up, no matter your uniform, background, or paycheck. So whether you're sweeping floors or sitting at the head of the table, remember, your value isn't defined by your job, it's defined by your character. Tell us, have you ever felt underestimated? Drop your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that prove the underdog can always rise.